All right. Fellow panelists, should we get started?
Do it.
All
Sounds good to
right.
me.
Well, welcome everyone to SureLink webinar for the Agentic Engagement. This will be I think, hopefully very informative panel conversation with a little bit of a fireside chat narrative on what AI actually means for your firm, especially in an agentic sense, because this is the hot word right now. But if I can advance, here we are. Oh, too far. Um, we're really glad you're here. We've got a packed 50 minutes ahead of us, and I think that honestly, most of you are going to leave here with a really good framework that we hope genuinely changes how you evaluate the AI conversations that you're already having in the market. But before we get into it, I really do want to introduce you to the people that you're going to be hearing from today. And I'll start. My name is Chris Witt. Hello, everyone. I am the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at SureLink, and I've spent the last roughly 2 decades of my life as a technologist in fintech software principally, um, with a heavy focus on AI and automation. But my job today is actually to facilitate, and I'll be drawing on for that two of the most intelligent people that I know to make sure that we go really deep where it matters for you. And I will let them introduce themselves. Amit, Ian.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. Thanks for setting the bar high. My name is Amit Nayar. I'm the CTO of ShareLink, where I lead all things technology, including software development for all of our products. I've been in product engineering for the better part of 3 decades, mostly in fintech. I've been at ShareLink now for a year and a half. If you can believe it, this is my third accounting-based SaaS company. Prior to this, I headed up engineering at a company called Flowcast, where we launched some of the first AI agents for accountants, primarily in the in-house accounting and finance space, helping companies close the books, and perform internal audit procedures. I'm excited to share how AI can apply to accounting firms with this group, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Welcome all. My name is Ian Ezra. I'm the head of product at SureLink. I've spent about 20 years in product management and design, building software solutions for big enterprises and smaller companies. Most recently, before joining SureLink, I was at Audit Board, now Optro, where we were very focused on innovating in the audit and assurance space through practical applications of AI. But more generally, when I think, across my career in GRC, construction tech, legal tech, marketing tech, any industry is really utilizing different flavors of AI has been such a key component to solving important challenges within those industries.
Mm, well, you're not wrong. Well, gentlemen, I'm thrilled to have you both here as we dive into really what should be a pretty packed next 50 minutes or so. And so for those of you watching, I do want to kind of dive into that and set your expectations as to what that's going to look like. We are going to start this chat with a conversation on why AI now? Because honestly, the market is genuinely shifting, I think, in a way that's worth naming. From there, we're going to walk through the framework of making sense of really the three types of AI that you're probably hearing about right now: automation, generative AI, and agentic AI, kind of giving you hopefully one clean map for evaluating, honestly, every vendor claim that you're going to hear this year. Then we're going to get honest about what the average firm actually needs before an agentic deployment can succeed, not what vendors want you to believe, but what the evidence and frankly our own experience actually shows. And then Ian is actually going to show you all something special, a sneak peek at the latest agents that SureLink is developing right now, built specifically for firm audit engagement workflows. And then as time permits, we're going to close with a Q&A and kind of a forward look of where things go next. A few quick logistics for those who are attending and eager for CPE credit. As a reminder, that mandates 50 minutes of attendance. That is tracked automatically, so just stay with us. As well as answering a minimum of 3 polling questions, which are going to come up through Zoom as we proceed. In terms of specific questions on our discussion topic today, you can submit them at any time through the Zoom Q&A panel. We Folks, we have SureLink CTO and head of product in the room today, so please don't hold back for our sake. And yes, this is being recorded. It will be available to all registrants within the week. Also, big thank you to a silent man behind the curtain, Alex, one of our senior product marketers, a former audit practitioner himself, who will be acting as our admin for this session, managing our polling as well as collating your questions for the end. So let's get started by getting to know the room with our first poll. Before we dive in, a couple of quick questions. Take about a minute. What's your role? What practice area do you work in? Wow, this is a pretty good mix, guys. I love it. We are seeing almost even distributions between associates, managers, partners. Wow, that's excellent. Okay, I think we're good to end the poll and show. Fantastic. Wow. So this is good to know. For our partners and seniors in the room, we're going to make sure this is worth your time. Honestly, for those working at it, I mean, in terms of direct accountants and auditors and associates out there, a lot of what we are going to cover today really is going to have direct application in audit. Yeah, this is exciting. Right. All right, y'all ready to get into it? Amit, Ian?
Let's do it.
Do
All
it.
right. Before we dive really deeply into the AI conversation, folks, the three of us felt it was really worth spending about 2 minutes understanding kind of why this conversation is happening right now. Um, the market has genuinely shifted. This is something as technologists we are all seeing in the space. The bottom line is that for years, up until just a couple years ago, most CPA firms outside the big four were extremely risk averse with new technology. When big vendors would launch new capabilities, we all saw the same pattern. Large firm clients were asking for features to be turned off. They would demand extensive testing and it stretched timelines, honestly, to the point where rollouts became almost comical in terms of their slowness. And that was the norm. That was how those of us in this space in software just learned to operate. But the truth is that mindset has changed radically, and there are really four things driving it. First, AI has earned a lot of trust. It's started to cross that chasm. Real use cases are working. Firms are seeing it in action, and the question has kind of shifted in everyone's minds from what if it gets it wrong to can we afford not to use this, which is a very important point. Second, it goes without saying the talent problem that I know all of you are seeing in the industry. It is serious. It's not temporary. Experienced auditors are retiring, and there just aren't enough people that are coming up behind them. Every firm pretty much is being asked to run more engagements with smaller teams, and that pressure is really only going in one direction. Third, worth noting, competitive pressure. Obviously, the top firms are watching each other closely, and if your peer is marketing itself as AI forward and you are not, that is a differentiation problem, both for talent and for your clients. And fourth, I think this one is underappreciated, but I think worth noticing. The consulting arms of a lot of the larger firms out there are selling AI capability to their own clients. You might be in that boat yourself. And if you as a firm can't demonstrate that internally, the advisory pitch kind of falls apart. So the bottom line is that most firms are still very risk aware, as we should be, but they're no longer willing to fall behind. And that shift is what's driving every conversation that's happening right now. Here is the simplest possible framework to set this up and kind of guide our conversation for everything that you are hearing and are going to hear in this market from any technology vendor you speak to. This is, in our opinion, how you should be thinking about it. 3 generations. Every product, every pitch, every competitor claim is going to fit somewhere on this line. On the left, automation. This is rules-based software. You define rules, it executes it every time. Exactly. It's deterministic. The same input always produces the same output. This is how we've been building software for decades. Incredibly useful, but not very adaptable. When something needs to change, a human has to physically update something in the software rules. Um, in the middle, and this is kind of where the zeitgeist, as you all are aware, has gone the past few years culturally for our planet, is generative AI. This is what most people think of when they hear the term AI right now. ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini. You give it a prompt, it produces something, a draft, a summary, an answer. Very flexible, handles a lot of variety, but it is reactive. It only acts when you ask it to. It doesn't really manage anything. And on the right, we have the hot word in the industry right now, and probably what caused you to tune into this particular webinar, agentic. This is goal-oriented AI. It acts somewhat autonomously. You give it an outcome to achieve, and it just works towards that outcome. It takes actions, it adapts when things change, but most importantly, escalates when it needs a human. It doesn't just respond, it ensures. Um, these are complicated technologies. And this is a very simple way of looking at it. But I mean, Amit, Ian, anything you want to add to this framing before we dive a bit deeper into it?
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned that we'll mostly be focusing on agentic during the conversation today, but I think it's important to call out that automation, generative AI, agentic, they all have their benefits and appropriate applications.
Mm.
The technology provider too focused on only one AI approach is likely gonna miss what really matters and what we're all trying to do, which is help solve meaningful problems for firms and improve day-to-day lives of practitioners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd echo that, as we're figuring out the best way to build our solutions, that decision we're constantly making is, what's the right type of AI for a specific step. So if the problem's, like you said, Chris, completely predictable, the same inputs, the same outputs every time, automation's probably the right way to go most of the time. Where agentic shines is where, work requires some judgment, say reading unstructured documents, synthesizing context across different steps, deciding what to do when something unexpected comes up. That's where kind of the rules-based systems can break down, and you need something that can adapt. And that's where agents really are showing their promise in not just accounting, but industry-wide.
Mm. Well, okay, let's put that in context and put some more structure around that specifically, because like I think that's really the way to explain it. The table you guys are seeing now really breaks this down across a few dimensions that I think matter to anyone who's evaluating technology in this space. The key row for me personally, my primary row is ownership when you're trying to understand this. Automation, interestingly, the technology itself doesn't have ownership. It does what it's told, nothing more. Despite the promise of AI, generative AI also really doesn't have ownership. It's an incredibly capable assistant, but it waits to be asked. Okay. Agentic, to both of your points, I mean, those systems take ownership of an outcome. They're driving toward a result. They're not necessarily waiting for instructions. Um, Second key row here, obviously adaptability, automation, very rigid. If a client sends you a document in a slightly different format and the system can't handle it, the rule is going to break. Okay, regardless of how fancy the system is. Um, Gen AI, very flexible within a conversation, but it doesn't track anything over time. Agentic systems adapt. If a deadline passes, something hasn't happened, they kind of respond to that reality. And to make that concrete example in an audit context for you, in a perfect agentic world, um, if something goes overdue, like a PVC item the client just hasn't responded to yet, automation would be technology that would recognize that and send you a notification, or the client for that matter. Obviously, Surelink's platform does that today. Generative AI is a tool that could help you draft a follow-up email quickly. Um, and obviously you'd still have to send it, track it, remember to follow up again. But in an extensive agentic system, in a perfect world, different agents could handle things autonomously, multiple agents working together. You have an agent that could detect the overdue claim item, or have that happen through automation. You could have an agent that actually drafts the follow-up or sends it, logs the action, and then potentially escalates to a senior or to a partner if there's still no response. And all, most importantly, without potentially a human touching it, until a human needs to touch it. And that's kind of the big point. Does that distinction land? I mean, Amit, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of nuance, and I think what you've captured are really the key things to
Yeah,
help distinguish.
yeah. And this is an important conversation because all of you watching this, I know you are hearing AI and agents and AI powered and AI smart and all these things. There's a lot of, and I say this as a marketer, there's a lot of marketing gobbledygook that's just being thrown out there, and that's unfortunate. We feel it's important that you all are armed with some very basic terminology to really understand, regardless of what's being thrown at you, how to appropriately evaluate things. And that really leads us into the bulk of our conversation here and our next poll. Um, we talked about why this conversation is happening, what the landscape looks like. But before I go deeper, we do want to hear from you all directly at this time. Where does your team actually lose the most time in a typical engagement right now? Take about a minute on this because this should help inform a lot of the chats we're about to have when it comes to how these different AI methodologies can be used to solve firm problems specifically. Mm, that's about the distribution I was thinking. We'll share shortly. Yeah, that's really okay. Wow. So as you guys can see, yeah, at least in terms of your experience, yeah, close to 50% of you are really focusing on document collection and follow up, and that's honestly what we expected, and it's exactly what the agents that Ian is going to show you later are actually built to address. Um, but honestly, it, wow, even testing, which is the next highest, that's Ian, gosh, where our data vouching agent comes in as well. Um, this really useful context. Excellent. Thank you all. You're going to see this context come back in our demo later. Excellent. All right. All right. The first crackle of our fireside chat, gentlemen. We have established the framework here. Hopefully, those attending now kind of have the terminology to put into context the things we're about to talk about. But I really want to go deeper, leaning towards the right side of that spectrum that we just went through agentic, but focusing all over as we need to. Because again, agentic is that word that's being applied to everything in the market right now, and a lot of it just doesn't hold up. Everyone's just throwing that word against the wall. So I want to answer the actual critical question here. What makes something genuinely agentic? And Amit, I'd love to start with you, especially considering your pedigree and experience here from an engineering standpoint. What does an agent actually need to function reliably?
Yeah, it is a complicated topic with a relatively simple answer. I think I'll use an analogy. I think you can think of an AI agent like a new staff auditor on your team, perhaps. You want them to
Mm,
have agency, but some controls in how they get work done. And so for them to do their job reliably, or for an agent to do its job on your behalf reliably, a few things have to be true. First, it needs secure access to the data required for the job. Second, it needs a goal coupled with clear instructions, well-defined procedures. And I think fortunately in the audit space, there's a lot of methodology and clearly defined procedures to handle the variability of the types of tests and inputs that a human or an agent might see. Third, it needs tools to act. If it's reading and comparing data, testing is not enough. It needs to be able to do something with what it finds. It needs to flag an item, write to a work paper, trigger a follow-up on your behalf. Fourth, it needs a way to raise its hand. It needs reliable agents need a graceful way to say, I'm not sure about this. I have low confidence rather than guessing. If it runs into something where it has low confidence in the answer, it should surface that, bring the human back in the loop rather than silently moving forward with the wrong answer. That's the
mm,
worst outcome possible. And then fifth, everything has to be logged, we feel anyways. Every action agent takes needs to be traceable. Why did it flag that item? What documents did it use and read to support its outcomes, its outputs? And it needs to show its work so a human can sign off on it in a review. So in short, an agent needs data access, clear instructions, the right tools, a way to escalate to a human, and a full audit trail. Given those five things, you get those five things right, you think you have the foundation for a reliable agent in your system.
mm. Important to know. Yeah, that's a really useful framework. Um, Ian, from a product design side, like considering that framework, where do you know how to apply it? And what I mean is like, how do you know when a workflow problem, especially on the firm side, is actually a good candidate for an agent?
Yeah. Uh, Let me start with a comment about AI in general.
Yeah.
As technologists and product or engineering, as we're working our way through our discovery process to really deeply understand any industry-specific problem and then ideate on different technical solutions that can solve that problem. And it's really important that we specifically like pause and evaluate if AI in any form can solve that problem either better, solve more of the problem or solve the problem in a way that reduces the time it takes a CPA professional to do their job. But the answer isn't always yes. So being intentional and selective is really important to not, dilute the usability and value of a product, and that in turn ultimately is going to just erode user trust.
Mm,
And in a world where hype and pressure around AI is high, fighting the urge to cram AI into the wrong spot does take real discipline. But to go back to your question on, what makes a good candidate for
yeah.
agentic, a few things I think about. Amit and you both spoke a little bit to this. If there's really clear if-then logic that we can consistently apply to get the intended results, then agentic likely isn't needed. If there's that heuristic, judgment-based logic, again, to Amit's point, like reading messy, unstructured data, how do you synthesize that, and ability to apply some professional skepticism, I think agentic AI is a good choice. But beyond that, some other criteria that comes to mind that is a good fit for agentic, high volume tasks, tasks where actions and decisions have a dependency on a prior output, tasks that require a lot of swivel chair between different systems and contexts. And then lastly, really tasks that are asynchronous, where it's just not, practical that a
Mm,
practitioner can be sitting there waiting to intervene.
mm. I know we're probably going to come back to it, but I really appreciate the point that you both are making, where agentic AI isn't the magic bullet for everything. You know what I mean? When you have a bright and shiny hammer and it's brand new, every problem starts to look like a nail. And that's really where I think agentic sits in terms of the zeitgeist right now. And so, making sure that you as firms have that discernment to, quite frankly, hold vendors like Suralink to task in terms of the technology that we are offering, and not trying to sell you a hammer for every problem you have. Um, Very useful. Um, okay, with that, I'd like to, and looking at time, I'd like to get into our next poll, and then actually get into the next phase of this, which is really our readiness conversation. Because understanding the landscape is one thing, I think implementing successfully agentic and otherwise is another. So two more questions for you all. One's really about where you're at today in terms of AI adoption. Take about a minute. Fascinated to see the answers here. Wow. Okay. I think that's good enough, Alex. Um, wow. So, first of all, for those of you who are actively evaluating, you're in the right room. That's good. Um, for those who haven't started yet, that's okay. That's why we're here. I'm thrilled and happy to see the like Ahmed, Ian. I mean, we've got almost 50% of our attendees either have at least one or multiple AI tools already in production use. Fantastic.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's what's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. All right. There is a statistic I keep coming back to. I remember I was actually at a Hackett conference the week this dropped for the Hackett group, and it was all anyone could talk about. It was last fall. You guys, you two, I know remember this salacious headline MIT study from their State of AI and Business report. I think it was September of last year that it came out. that had this incredible headline that said 95% of generative AI pilots fail. Um, and it was all anyone could talk about. Now, at the time that this report was researched and created, most companies were honestly really just starting to dip their toes into Gen AI. And agentic, let's be honest, was barely in the peripheral line of sight for the vast majority of companies at that point in time. Um, but in that context, when you actually read the research, it was pretty consistent on why that 95% failure rate was observed. And it was that most of these Gen AI pilots, Gen AI, failed because the organization wasn't ready, not because the technology didn't work, which was interesting. And I really do believe this framing matters for agentic AI as well. So I'd like to have an honest conversation about what actually has to be true for an agentic installation or deployment to succeed. Really starting with the human side of this, gentleman, because I think user acceptance gets underestimated. That's kind of what the MIT research showed us. The willingness of practitioners to engage with an agent, to trust it, trust what it produces, not just override it as a reflex. I don't think that's a given. And so like training and enablement, I think they matter enormously. But based on what you've told us so far, what's interesting about agentic specifically, I think, is that it actually changes the user experience conversation. Amit, you made this point that, it's basically an agent is like an associate, auditor in your ranks. Um, and that's a radically different way of thinking about technology because that agent is managing outcomes, it's acting independently. The moments where a human comes in are much more deliberate and better defined. It's not so much like AI is doing everything. It's not I'm doing everything. It's a clear handoff. Um, Ian, like on this card, I really wanted to come back to you on the design side for this. Like, what do firms and technology providers need to keep in mind when they're deploying and designing agents in this kind of high stakes regulated environment that we all operate in?
Well, first, Chris, is exactly what you just said, that principle that it is high stakes and highly regulated. So we simply can't just throw, I mean, that's an underlying principle that we all have to keep in mind. But we can't just simply throw, an AI agent at a problem and cross our fingers. A lot of things to keep front and center. As you said, both as technologists and as firms evaluating and using these, and hopefully we're looking at the same considerations. One of the first things that comes to mind is just a low tolerance for inaccurate results and wrong decisions. Both false positives and false negatives are a concern, but for the
Mm,
CPA industry, false positive is most problematic. So really important for agents to understand what their confidence levels are. If the AI is confidently, unconfident or unconfidently confident, those are gates that should be put in place to prevent an agent from acting on those results or trigger, bringing a human in the loop. But that human in the loop shouldn't just be for when an agent's not highly confident. There's going to be high risk or just high impact tasks that an agent can likely do the legwork, but you still probably want those hard gates introduced to require that a practitioner, really explicitly determine this is the right decision and approve it.
mm,
Um, and there's also going to be circumstances where the agent just hits a roadblock, right? Can't figure out what to do. In this case, as Ahmed mentioned earlier, important to avoid that silent failure. How do you do that hand raise so that a practitioner can come in, provide clarification, and then the agent can resume the workflow once that guidance is provided?
mm,
And I'd say more generally, like products should always enable practitioners with that option, even for really low risk tasks, in terms of exercising their professional judgment, years of experience to either override or just adjust the results of an agent or any AI. So for a lot of those reasons, I think key, and Amit mentioned this, like agent an agent or any AI really can't be a black box. So from a design perspective, products must really bake in that agent reasoning that Amit mentioned. Why did it flag this? What source documents did it look at? How do you deep link into those? But it's important that that's front and center in that log. It can't be tucked away in admin settings somewhere. So it
mm,
needs to be integrated front and center into the experience so that practitioners can't miss it. And that's sort of a design consideration and paradigm that didn't necessarily exist so much pre-agentic. Um,
Mm.
and kind of thinking more about that idea of not having a black box and being very clear on that agent reasoning, because agentic AI typically covers, asynchronous multi-step processes, it's important to think about how the agent can show reasoning like end to end across its set of tasks, but also at any given point in time. So rather than just showing in progress, which is maybe a traditional, status to
Yeah.
show, how can we show states and step-by-step progress? So for example, right, maybe the first step of an agent is executing is going through and reading through a bunch of invoices, and maybe that's done. But the second step is matching to bench ledgers. Maybe that's still running at 60% complete. So how do you provide that context of where it is in point in time?
Hmm.
And then another reason to have that very clear log of agent steps and reasoning is that agentic AI is often non-deterministic, meaning there can be some variance in how the agent executes its task.
Okay, now I got to stop you there because I got to come back. I've heard this term now, and I've read it too. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so I need you both to educate me. Deterministic, non-deterministic. These are like they're going to hear this live in the wild. They're hearing it now. Like what does that mean simply?
Yeah, we've danced around it a little bit here, and I don't know if we've necessarily used these terms. So I agree. Like it's probably a good time to give them a little bit better, clearer definition. So deterministic systems are systems where the exact same input will always return the exact same output. And then non-deterministic systems like large language models, LLMs, are systems where the outcomes involve probability. So the same inputs can yield different results. LLMs don't guarantee they'll return the same results given the same inputs because LLMs try to predict the content of the response using probability, using mathematics. So the challenge with the challenge with the deterministic systems comes into play when the inputs are diverse. So it's hard to build the rules that'll cover all cases, and you get a input that breaks the system in unpredictable ways, and the system becomes unpredictable, and trust erodes can erode in a rules-based system as well pretty quickly. Similarly, with non-deterministic systems, I think by design, the non-determinism is kind of their perceived Achilles heel. That's where you see like LLMs, quote unquote, hallucinate. The way we try to manage that, and the way that we're trying to manage it in engineering and in technology, kind of industry wide, is with really solid context engineering. Not to get too technical, but the goal there is to manage non-determinism in LLMs is you try to reduce the context window for the LLM, the context window that it has to deal with. So that means reducing the inputs that you send to the LLM as much as possible. So it only has to evaluate the bare minimum of what it needs to do the job. That way, you can avoid those hallucinations. You get more consistent outputs from the LLM, and we found that strategy to be working quite well.
That's good to know. It's interesting to hear you describe it this way because we people, humans, we are non-deterministic entities, right?
Absolutely. As
Like
much as
that
we wish we
that
were 100% consistent all
like
the time. My wife will
uh,
tell you I'm definitely non-deterministic.
I think a lot of the I don't want to say stress, but weirdness around AI in terms of how we interact and adopt with it is that this may be the first time as professionals, all of us on this call, all of us, that we are interacting with a piece of technology, of software that is non-deterministic, like a person. It's a completely different way of expectation interaction. And so it can make things weird and unusual. And I'd like to continue on this point, especially because this goes into the transparency and black box, Ian, that you were just speaking about. Like that whole agent concept and this non-deterministic that can sound very black boxy, like a person's brain. How do they think? I don't know. For a partner, perhaps who's on this webinar, who's ultimately responsible for the engagement. Like this begs the question, and I think this is an important thing that we should be answering, and that everyone on this call should be considering as well. What are the human judgment calls that, no matter how sophisticated a non-deterministic agent is, that you we believe an agent probably should never replace?
Super good question. A few categories, come to mind. Like the first that sticks out is anytime the underlying need is understanding and evaluating human motivation and intent. AI is not particularly good at that. Humans are very complex creatures, as we were talking about, and understanding that motivation is something we want to use our judgment for. So, determining example, like if we're trying to determine something is qualitatively material, an AI can determine that a misstatement of, $10,000 is quantitatively immaterial to maybe a major corporation, but likely not that misstatement, intentionally allowed a company to meet its earnings forecast or was done so with the intention of like hiding some sort of, illegal or non-compliant transaction. Again, that intent is very hard to suss out. Um, Secondly, being a final tiebreaker, audit and tax practitioner work isn't always clear cut. It often involves contradictory evidence. So agent may be able to flag contradiction, but ultimately need humans to use their judgment to resolve. And then lastly, I think we've already touched on this one, but decisions that require navigating a lot of ambiguity or just high stakes in nature. So, example, issuing a final audit opinion. That's pretty high stakes, right? A decision to issue an unmodified or qualified or adverse opinion on a financial statement requires really a holistic understanding and kind of synthesis of all the different evidence and data. I'd say more importantly, it's a statement of professional judgment, and that's something that we don't want to delegate to a machine.
Mm, mm. Okay, so understanding then the sort of where an agentic technology should and shouldn't be implemented. That makes sense. Very quickly, once you've identified the successful target scenarios, what are the conditions that actually determine success? Is another good question.
Yeah. The way that I would evaluate agents, and I think that everybody should be, is first of all, are they effective? Are agents executing the tasks that you've delegated to them in a way where the objective is being met? You should evaluate it based on the outcomes that it's intended to achieve, and if it's not achieving your expected outcomes, it's not effective, and I would consider that pretty unsuccessful. Um, you were trying to achieve consistency in what we've, defined as a somewhat inconsistent kind of medium. Agents are often handling, non-deterministic tasks with some variation in how the task is executed, and what the exact results are. So the output should not have massive variances. They should be in a margin of error that you might expect from a human or better. Otherwise, I think you might find uh, lack of success from that agent to the end user. And I think trust. I think at the end of the day, the agent needs to be designed and delivered in a way that can build trust with the humans that are interacting with it and delegating work to it. So users and practitioners, they need to understand what an agent is doing and thinking, and that's where that agent should, like Ian touched on, we've touched on throughout this, should never be a total black box. It should have ultimate transparency and traceability to every piece of information it's used to do its job, and allow a human to review that and evaluate, the efficacy of whether that's the right set of information to achieve the goal. So that's how I would evaluate agents. Other people might have other opinions.
No, I think that's an honest take from both of you. To summarize sort of this end of the conversation, we're running long on time, so I'd like to move forward. But I often get asked, what should firms be skeptical about when a vendor is making agentic claims? And like my honest take, based on what you guys have told me, is that I think every single person on this call, every firm should hold every vendor, including SureLink, accountable to the framework that we have been discussing today. Is it adaptive? Does it ensure outcomes or just assist with tasks? How is it tracked and audited? I think those questions are going to cut through the noise faster than anything else. And frankly, we said this before, agentic isn't a magic bullet. As you guys have said, automation and generative AI, they bring real value at the right moments. The question is always, what problem are we actively trying to solve? And is this the right tool for it? Um, so, okay, with that, building on that point, with all this conversation around agentic, to that point specifically, and the reality of when and when not to implement it, it's important to continually note that even existing automation and Gen AI are delivering superb results before we even get to agentic technology. And even now, we at SureLink are seeing firms that are using our existing automation capability realize 83% higher client satisfaction, 84% faster growth than their peers. I mentioned these stats not as a sales moment. We're going to get to that at the end. But because it matters for the framing of what Ian is about to show you. The agents that we are building aren't being bolted onto something generic. They are being built into a platform that is already at the center of how thousands of engagement teams work with the appropriate data clarity. And that's a key differentiator. So Ian, I'll let you kind of take it away from theory to practice because you have some exciting stuff to show us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Really thrilled to be able to talk through a few things. For illustrative purposes, this is a very simplified overview of an engagement lifecycle. Just want to draw everybody's attention to the two blue boxes, document upload and sample testing. And we're going to look at two different agents that operate at each of those engagement phases. So starting with our document pre-screening agent, this agent automatically run when client-provided files are uploaded to an engagement, and its objective is to determine if those client-provided files are what the firm has asked for as part of that specific PPC request, and that it works for any request. And then we'll also look at our data vouching agent. So this agent will automatically run when both firm sample selections are provided and clients have uploaded their files. The agent will autonomously execute details to confirm with the objective of determining what passed, what didn't pass for a sample test. But since a picture is worth 1,000 words and a demo, hopefully more than that, let's just take a look at it live in action. Something to call out that Chris mentioned